What happens when a monster's daughter refuses to be his property? In this story, one act of defiance in a dusty town square unearths a secret that has been buried for a generation and proves that some things are worth fighting for. Don Fabian Salcedo's fist crashed against his daughter's face. The crack echoed through the marketplace, silencing every conversation. Renata collapsed onto the dusty ground, her cheek burning, blood welling from her split lip. "I told you!" her father roared, his eyes shot with fury as he loomed over her. "You will marry the man I choose." Renata struggled to push herself up, her hands clawing at the hard-packed earth. Around her, the people of Sonora stood frozen, their faces a familiar mix of horror and fear. No one moved, no one dared. Don Fabian was the most powerful man in the region. His cruelty was a law unto itself. She had woken before sunrise to his shouting, a familiar storm that seeped through the thick adobe walls of the hacienda. "Renata, come here immediately." The familiar knot tightened in her stomach. She rose in silence, slipping into her faded blue dress. He was waiting for her by the window, his imposing figure a shadow against the dawn. "Remigio Garcia is coming to see you," he announced without turning. "His son, Patricio, wants you for a wife." The ground shifted beneath her. Patricio Garcia. Everyone knew him. His drunken rages were legendary. His cruelty to women was a town secret everyone shared. "Father, she began. The look he gave her was colder than a grave. "You think you have the right to an opinion?" For 20 years, she had been his property, not his daughter, his asset, to be sold to the highest bidder, and that morning something inside her finally snapped. The words escaped before she could stop them. "I will not marry him." The silence that followed was terrifying. Don Fabian froze. "What did you say?" he whispered, his voice more dangerous than any shout. "I will not marry Patricio Garcia," she repeated, and for the first time in her life, she raised her eyes to meet his. The first blow came without warning. His open palm struck her so hard it spun her around. The next few minutes blurred into a storm of strikes and screams. He seized her by the hair and dragged her to the front door. "Let the whole town see," he thundered. "Let them see what happens to daughters who defy their fathers." He dragged her to the marketplace and threw her in the dirt. "Look at her!" he shouted, yanking her upright by the arm. "This is my daughter, my property. No one tells me what I can do with what is mine." Renata searched the faces in the crowd. She saw the baker, Maria, her face frozen in terror. She saw the Castellano brothers from the blacksmith shop, staring at the ground. Even Father Miguel, the priest, stood at a distance, unwilling to act. They all knew, but they were all afraid. Don Fabian leaned close, his breath stinking of alcohol. "You will beg me for forgiveness," he hissed, "right here, before all of them." Tears mixed with blood and dust. She had no choice. "Forgive me, Father," she whispered. Louder. "Forgive me, Father," she cried. "I was insolent. It will not happen again." His smile was more painful than any blow. It was the predator's grin of triumph. He had crushed her completely. He had extinguished the last spark, or so he thought. As Renata lay in the dirt, a shadow fell over her. A tall, powerful silhouette placed itself between her and her father, blocking the sun. Don Fabian's next blow never landed. His fist was caught mid-air by a hand as unyielding as stone. The plaza went dead silent. Renata lifted her eyes. The man was taller than her father, his skin the color of copper, his black hair falling loose around his shoulders. But it was his eyes that stole her breath. Dark as obsidian, they held an intensity she had never seen before. "Let me go," Don Fabian growled. "This is not your fight, Apache." The man did not release him. His gaze shifted down to Renata, lingering on the bruises and the blood. When he spoke, his voice was low, but it carried across the square with absolute authority. "Any man who strikes a defenseless woman makes it my fight." Don Fabian wrenched his arm free, stumbling backward. The stranger crouched beside Renata. For the first time, a man extended a hand to her without menace. "Can you stand?" he asked. His voice was gentle. She placed her hand in his. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Once she was on her feet, he turned back to her father. "Who the devil are you?" Don Fabian demanded. "To come into my town and tell me how to treat my family?" The stranger straightened to his full height. "I am Tay, of the Chiricahua people. I came to trade cattle. But I will not stand idle while a coward harms one who cannot defend herself." The name echoed through the square. Tay, a respected leader, a formidable warrior, known for his unbreakable code of honor. Don Fabian paled. This was not a man he could intimidate. Tay turned his gaze back to Renata. "Do you want to come with me?" he asked simply. The question struck her like lightning. In 20 years, no one had ever asked her what she wanted. "You cannot take her," Don Fabian barked. "She is my daughter. She is betrothed." "To a drunk who beats women," Tay shot back, his eyes never leaving Renata's. "Is that the life you want?" Something that had slept for years inside her finally woke up. "Yes," she whispered. "What did you say?" Tay leaned closer. "Yes," she repeated, her voice firm. "I want to go with you." Don Fabian roared in outrage and lunged, but Tay was there first, a wall of muscle and resolve. "You heard her," he declared. "She has chosen. She cannot choose. She is my property." "People are not property," Tay replied. Then his gaze hardened, and his next words sealed her fate. "And now, she is mine." The declaration was so absolute, no one dared to contradict it. Tay slipped the leather mantle from his shoulders and wrapped it around Renata. It smelled of grass and campfire smoke, the scent of freedom. "Do you have anything you need to take?" he asked. She thought of the hacienda, a prison of painful memories. She shook her head. "Nothing." He guided her to his horse, a magnificent black stallion. As he lifted her onto its back, her father hurled one last threat. "This won't end here, Salcedo. I'll come for her. I will bring every man I have." Tay stopped and turned. His voice was cold as the desert wind at midnight. "If you come for her," he said, "bring enough men. You'll need them." Then he swung up behind her, his arms enclosing her not to imprison, but to protect. For the first time in her life, Renata felt safe. As they galloped from the square, she looked back. Her father stood alone in the dust, his power broken. Her old life was over. A new one, terrifying and unknown, had just begun. But she had no idea this wasn't a random rescue. Tay hadn't just been passing through. He was in Sonora for a reason. He was hunting a ghost, and he had just found her. They rode for 3 days, deeper into the harsh, beautiful country of the Apache. The first night they camped by a stream under a sky full of stars. Tay built a fire. "What will happen to me?" Renata finally asked. "That depends on you," he answered. "When I said you were mine, I meant you were under my protection. There is a difference." She stared at him, confused. "Among my people," he explained, "women are not possessions. They are companions, healers, warriors. They have voices. They choose their own paths." The idea was so radical, so completely alien to her world, she could barely comprehend it. "Could you teach me?" she whispered, tears of a strange new hope welling in her eyes. "Teach me to be free." A genuine warm smile touched his lips. "I can teach you to fight," he said, "but freedom is something you must find within yourself." As they traveled, the world she knew began to unravel. He told her of Apache women who led hunts, whose wisdom was sought by chiefs. He told her marriages were partnerships, not transactions. But his eyes held a story he wasn't telling. There was a watchfulness about him, a tension that had nothing to do with her. The second night, he noticed her flinch when he moved too quickly. "How long did he beat you?" he asked gently. Since I can remember, she whispered. His jaw tightened. He didn't say anything else, but she saw a flicker of something cold and dangerous in his eyes. It wasn't directed at her. It was for her father. That same night as she slept, she heard voices. Not from their camp, faint, distant, men speaking Spanish. She sat up, her heart pounding. Tay was already awake, a rifle in his hand, staring into the darkness. They're following us, she whispered. Not us, he said, his voice grim. They've been shadowing me since I crossed the border. This wasn't about her, not entirely. She was caught in the middle of something else, a secret war she didn't understand. Who are they? She asked. Men who work for men like your father, he said, his eyes never leaving the dark ridge. Men who believe they own the land and everything on it. The next morning, as the sun lifted above the mountains, she saw the Apache village for the first time. It was a valley of life, ringed by cliffs, with leather-skinned teepees beside a winding river. A young woman strode out to meet them. She had Tay's eyes, but they burned with a fiercer, more protective fire. This was his sister, Anna. So this is the woman you bring, Anna said, her gaze sharp, assessing. She looks like she has suffered. Her father beat her, Tay said. She needs time to heal. Anna's expression softened. She turned to Renata. Welcome. Here you will be safe. But as Renata dismounted, another warrior approached. His face was hard, his eyes suspicious. He looked from Renata to Tay. You bring a Mexican woman into our camp? He challenged. After what they have done to our people? She is under my protection, Kael, Tay said, his voice firm. Your protection brings their trouble to our door. Kael shot back. I saw riders on the south ridge. They carry rifles, not trading goods. The welcome soured. The safety she had just felt began to evaporate. She had escaped her father's cage, only to land in a camp divided by her very presence. She was not just a refugee. She was a spark, and the whole valley was dry tinder. The healing was slow, and it came in pieces. Anna's friends, a healer named Itel and a huntress named Nayeli, took Renata in. Your body belongs to you, Itel told her, applying a salve to her bruises. The words were a revelation. Nayeli taught her the laws of the camp. Respect is earned by actions, not inherited by birth, she explained. But it was Tay who began to remake her world. Every morning he taught her how to string a bow, how to track, how to fight. Her hands, trained only for sewing, trembled. Her legs, weakened by confinement, ached. But she didn't give up. The first time she loosed an arrow and it struck the target. She cried. It was the first thing she had ever achieved for herself. You have a natural instinct, Tay told her, and his praise was a warmth she'd never known. At night they would talk. She told him of her dreams of flying away. Now, she confessed, I think I would have flown here. He reached for her hand, and his touch was comfort, not pain. Your heart is yours alone, he said. Only you can decide to whom you give it. But the secret he carried remained between them. One night, she finally asked him, Who were the men following you? He was silent for a long time. Years ago, he began, my uncle made a peace treaty with a Mexican landowner near the border. It was a secret pact to share a silver vein that ran between our lands. My uncle went to meet him to finalize the deal. He never returned. What happened? She whispered. The landowner claimed my uncle never arrived, but we found tracks of shod horses leading away from the meeting place. The silver was never spoken of again. The landowner grew rich. My people grew poorer. You think the landowner killed him? She said. I think he stole from him, Tay replied, his voice hard. And I have been searching for proof ever since. That man's name was Don Fabian Salcedo. The air went cold. Her father. The man who had beaten her was also the man who had likely murdered Tay's uncle and stolen his people's future. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Tay hadn't just stumbled upon her in the marketplace. He had been watching her father for weeks. He had been looking for a way in, a weakness, a crack in Don Fabian's armor. And then her father had dragged her into the square and beaten her. He hadn't saved a random woman. He had seized an opportunity. He had taken the one thing his enemy valued as property. She wasn't a refugee he had rescued. She was a weapon he had claimed. The revelation was a punch to the gut. She felt used, a pawn in a game of revenge that stretched back for years. "Did you know who I was when you saved me?" she asked, her voice tight with betrayal. Tay met her gaze. There was no lie in his eyes. "I knew you were his daughter, that is all." "And you used me," she accused. "I saw a man beating a woman," he said firmly. "That is what I acted on. The fact that you were Don Fabian's daughter. That was something the spirits decided, not me. But yes, I will use his cruelty against him. I will use the truth of who he is to find justice for my uncle." She wanted to be angry, but she couldn't. He had still saved her. He had still treated her with a respect no one else ever had. But the purity of her rescue was gone, replaced by a complex and dangerous reality. One morning, a scout rode in, breathless. "Mexican riders," he announced. "A large group, armed. They're coming from the south, and their leader is asking for a woman." Her father was coming. Tay's face hardened. "How many?" 25, the scout replied. The village prepared for war. Men and women moved with quiet efficiency, grabbing weapons, taking up positions. They were outnumbered, but they were defending their home. "He's going to take me back," Renata whispered, the old terror returning. "No one will take you," Tay vowed. Anna approached, holding a bow and a quiver of arrows. She extended them to Renata. "Will you hide while others fight for your freedom?" she asked. "Or will you fight beside us?" Renata stared at the weapons. She had never fought anyone. But she looked at Tay, at the people who had taken her in, who were willing to die for her. She took the bow. Her hands trembled, but she held it firm. "I don't know how," she whispered. "Courage is not the absence of fear," Tay told her. "It is choosing to act rightly despite the fear." As the sun began to set, they saw the campfires of her father's mercenaries, glowing like malicious eyes in the dark. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about justice for a murdered man and a stolen future. And she was standing right in the middle of it all. Dawn broke, bleeding red across the sky. Renata stood beside Anna on a ridge overlooking the trail. She saw her father and his mercenaries advance. She saw Patricio Garcia riding close behind him. "I know you're there," Don Fabian shouted. "I want to speak with the savage who stole my daughter." Tay stepped into the clearing. "I stole no one," he called back. "She chose to come with me." "My daughter has no will of her own," Don Fabian roared. "She is my property." "People are not property," Tay replied. "I see your warriors in the rocks," her father sneered. "We have more men, better weapons. You cannot win." Tay's voice was calm. "How many of your men are willing to die for the whim of a man who beats women?" A ripple of unease ran through the mercenaries. Don Fabian's face darkened. Then Renata made a choice. She stepped from the ridge and walked down into the clearing, her bow in her hand. "There's my sensible girl," her father said with a cruel smile. "Come here. We're going home." She looked him dead in the eye. "No," she said. The word shattered the morning air. "I will not go back with you," she said, her voice ringing with a strength she didn't know she had. "I will not marry Patricio Garcia. I will not be your property." Her father spurred his horse, lunging toward her to strike her down. But this time, Renata did not flinch. She raised her bow, aiming the arrow directly at his heart. Don Fabian's horse reared back in shock. "You would dare aim at your own father?" "I would dare defend myself from anyone who tries to hurt me," she said, her voice steady. "Including you." The standoff was broken by Patricio Garcia. "Enough of this!" he shouted, drawing his pistol and firing. The shot whistled past Renata's head. Before he could fire again, an Apache arrow struck his shoulder, sending him screaming from his horse. The valley erupted in chaos. Arrows rained from the cliffs. War cries thundered from the rocks. The mercenaries, ambushed and surrounded, fell into disarray. Renata fought beside Tay, her bow singing. Each arrow she loosed was a release of years of pain and rage. She was no longer a victim. She was a warrior. Her father, seeing the battle turn, let out a roar of hate and charged straight for her. "If you cannot be mine, you'll belong to no one." But Tay intercepted him. The two men clashed, a brutal collision of two worlds. Don Fabian fought with fury, but Tay fought with purpose. He disarmed her father and threw him to the ground. The fighting stopped. Don Fabian lay defeated in the dirt. Tay did not kill him. He stepped aside and looked at Renata. She walked forward until she stood over the man who had terrorized her entire life. "Look at you now," she said, her voice calm. "Defeated by the daughter you thought you could break." He glared up at her. "You cannot—" "Cannot what?" She cut him off, kneeling beside him. "Cannot choose my own life. Cannot defend myself. Cannot say no." She leaned closer. "It turns out we can. And I just did." She had found the one weapon that could truly destroy him. The truth. "Get up," she ordered, "and go. If you ever return, remember that I am no longer the girl you used to beat. I am a warrior now, and I have a nation ready to defend me." He mounted his horse, his pride shattered. Before he left, he cast her one last look. "You're just like your mother," he muttered. For the first time, it didn't sound like a curse. When he was gone, the Apache village erupted in celebration. They had not just won a battle, they had affirmed a principle. In the months that followed, Renata became one of them. She became a respected archer, a wise counselor, and Tay's chosen companion. Their bond was built on mutual respect, a deep, patient understanding. One night, sitting by the fire, he asked her, "Do you ever regret leaving your old life?" She thought for a moment. "How could I regret finding out who I truly am? Before you, I was only a shadow." "I did nothing," he said softly. "I only offered you a safe place to discover yourself." She turned to him, her eyes glowing in the firelight. "You didn't save me, Tay," she said, a smile carrying the weight of her transformation. "You gave me back to myself." He took her hand, and she placed hers in his with the confidence of a woman who knew her own worth. "And now?" he asked. "Now we live," Renata replied, "free, together, and as proof that we can choose our own destiny." In the distance, a coyote howled at the moon, its cry carrying across the desert like a promise of all the dawns yet to come. If you were moved by this story of a woman who reclaimed her life, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more tales of survival and justice. Thanks for watching.